everyone to our Tuesday evening class, and a special welcome to those who are new today. In just a moment we'll sit for a little bit of meditation first of all, and before I do that, for the benefit of those who are new, I'd like to just introduce meditation a little bit by saying that it's something that is increasingly relevant to the way we lead our lives in the present day, because there are so many demands on our attention in all the busy things that we do in our lives that many people find themselves feeling quite exhausted by the end of the day, being constantly pulled away to all the things around you that are holding your attention hostage. Everyone needs a little bit of time to sort of gather back their sense of awareness within the space of their body again, in order to replenish some of that energy. And meditation is proposed as a way to help us to do that, as a way to work with that part of ourselves that gets so exhausted by all the demanding things that are going on in our lives. And the way meditation manages to do that is to reposition the focal point of our attention back within the space of the body. And when I'm talking about the mind, I don't mean the nervous system or the brain, but rather our sense of awareness that can be pulled away from where we physically are to the things around us. So it's a way of rounding up that awareness component of ourselves and bringing it back within the space of our body. And there's a place within us which is particularly effective for replenishing our mental energy. And that is a place somewhere down at the solar plexus that you can see in the little diagram. But in fact, anywhere within the space of the body will work just fine. But that's the most efficient point of all. Generally, our mind is something we can't see with the naked eye. We can't even get an X-ray of it or an MRI scan of it. But subjectively, we can know where our awareness is located by the things in the mind, the objects in the mind. So, for example, if you were to conjure up a picture in your mind, such as, let's say, the sun shining, if you can think of that picture, seeing the sun is no longer out and you're not looking out of the window at it, if you can see a picture, however vague, then it means that that's your mind creating the picture rather than just your memory of it. It's an ability we all have, which is officially known as interoception. So it's one of your senses, but it's not a sense which is directed externally, but a sense which is directed internally. So conjuring up a little picture like that, and it could be a feeling that the sun is somehow present inside you. You'd notice it by its feeling or its warmth or its size inside you. Either way, that is holding your attention in one place. And the inner object like that tells you two important things which are relevant to meditation. First of all, where your mind is, so the same place as where the picture is. And secondly, how good is your continuity of attention, because the picture will only stay with you for as long as you have your attention focused on it. So your mind may wander off, but it's just a case of bringing it back again to your center whenever you notice it's wandered. And little by little you train the mind to stay where it needs to be. Some people find that it's not just a wandering mind that is an obstacle when they're meditating, but also thoughts coming up in the mind. Some people have more thoughts in the mind than others. If thoughts are at quite a low level, often you can get away with just ignoring them. If you don't pay them too much attention, then generally they will die down by themselves, almost like sediment will settle out if you stop stirring the barrel. But for some people who have an extra big helping of thoughts, especially those who have problems sleeping or perhaps suffering from anxiety or panic even, then sometimes it's useful to use something known as a mantra, which is some sort of word of your own that you'd repeat silently in your mind alongside the inner object. And the idea of that is to sort of run interference on the random thoughts by having some sort of expression or phrase in your mind the whole of the time to sort of basically block out those random thoughts. So a suggestion for a mantra, which comes from this particular lineage is the words Samma Arahang, which you can see on the screen, which means a pure state of mind achieved in the proper way. But you could easily use something simpler like brighter and brighter, clearer and clearer, or even as a phrase or an aspiration from your own spiritual tradition. So you could make up one of your own if you wanted to. But you'd keep that going for as long as it's needed to block the random thoughts from the mind. And eventually your mind will be left quieter and with just that inner focus to take the mind deeper. Yes. When we're sitting for meditation, generally the classic way to sit for meditation, like some of you are, is sitting on the floor on a meditation mat, in which case you sit in a half lotus position with the right foot up on the calf of the left leg. If you're sitting on a chair, it's also just fine, but generally tend to sit up fairly straight, not bolt upright, but straight enough not to get sleepy halfway through. And the way we put our hands together, whether we're sitting on a meditation mat or on a chair, is with the right hand on top of the left hand, index finger of the right hand touching against the thumb of the left hand, and our hands just resting palm upwards in our lap. So today we'll sit for about half an hour, and I'll lead you through the meditation. And the topic of tonight's meditation is the light of the inner sun. So if you just follow through with that and make yourself comfortable using the principles I've just explained. We start by finding a comfortable position for ourselves in the meditation. If we're sitting on the floor, then we try to sit cross-legged with our right leg over our left leg, the right hand over the left hand, with our palms turned upwards and resting in our lap. Even if we're sitting on a chair, then we try to sit in a relaxed way. Sometimes it's better to avoid leaning against the backrest, but still sitting in a fairly upright posture, a position of poise. And we adjust our sitting position so that we feel completely at ease. And we close our eyes very gently if we haven't already done so. And breathe in gently and deeply to ourselves. When we breathe in, we may feel our chest expanding and our back straightening. And as we breathe out, we may feel that we are letting go of any negativity or problems along with our out-breath. Again, we breathe in, taking in the cool, refreshing air from around us, allowing it to refresh us from the inside. And after a few such breaths, you start to feel more ready for the meditation ahead. One of the most important parts of the meditation preparation is the way we close our eyes. We need to close our eyes as gently as possible, with our upper and lower eyelashes just touching lightly together. We never squeeze our eyes closed, and we avoid applying any force to our eyes. Our eyelids should feel as light as a feather. And we allow all the muscles around our eyes to relax as far as possible, because they're some of the most sensitive muscles in our body. If we're able to relax the muscles around our eyes, then all the other muscles in our body will follow suit. So we allow that tide of relaxation from around our eyes to spread downwards through our face. We might try putting a little smile on our face, relaxing the muscles of our forehead, our cheeks, our chin, allowing them to be fully relaxed. We spread the relaxation down through our neck, to our shoulders, to both arms, to our hands, all the way down to our fingertips. We allow the tide of relaxation to continue further on down through our torso, chest, trunk and abdomen, all the way down through our legs, to our feet and our toes. And examining each part of our body, if we feel any discomfort remaining or resulting from our posture, then we can make an adjustment now, so that the blood can circulate freely throughout the body, and to minimize any possible aches or pains during the meditation. To the point that we feel we could sit like this for as long as we liked. And when we feel the whole body is totally relaxed, we feel as if our body is light in weight, hollow like a tube, with no internal organs. Just hollow and light, as if our whole body were floating in the air, or as if our whole body were expanding, light in weight, expanding outwards towards the horizon, as if our whole body were merging with the atmosphere around us. Little by little, our body disappearing until we feel no physicality of our body anymore. At which point we can turn our attention to relaxing the mind. Normally our mind is filled with so many thoughts, so many worries, But for now, we put each of these thoughts and worries to one side, leaving us with an empty mind, like a person with no future and no past, where all you have is the present moment, the here and now. And you might imagine that you're sitting all alone in a vast space, and all around you is nothing and no one. And if your mind drifts away onto some other thoughts, then just let the thoughts settle and remain in this silence for a few moments. And at this point, we breathe in really slowly and make a mental note of the turning point of our breath, somewhere inside our stomach. And once we've taken note of that turning point of the breath, we can forget about our breath from here on in. It's just that the turning point of the breath inside our stomach is the very center of the body. It's a place where we would prefer to relocate the focus of our attention. It's the place that we're going to rest our awareness, right here at the center of the stomach. In practice, it doesn't really matter exactly where we place the mind, at least in the beginning. Because once our mind is calm and refined enough, the mind will zero in on the exact center of the body all by itself. So for now, we might conjure up in the mind some sort of bright, imaginary object, maybe like a picture of the sun shining, a full moon, a star, perhaps a diamond, or even the feeling that one of those objects is present in the mind. Even if we can't see it, but we can feel its presence by its weight or by its texture. And we allow that imaginary object to settle, gravitating gently downwards to that point at the turning point of the breath, or the most comfortable point for us inside the area of our stomach. Once it aligns itself properly, you'll have the feeling almost as if something is alive at the center of the body. But for the time being, we just rest the mind gently in the general area of the center of the stomach, at the point which feels the most comfortable for us. The way we place the awareness at the center of the body should be as gentle as if you were floating a needle on the surface of some water. It's about the same sort of gentleness that we need when placing the mind gently at the center of the body. But to help to keep the mind in place, we maintain that image of the bright object, or the feeling of the presence of such an object at the center of ourselves. A picture rather like the sun on the horizon, shining bright, clear and round. Visualizing without any undue effort, because after all it's our natural ability to picture things internally in the mind. Whatever we think of, then that picture will arise automatically. It's just the way we visualize. So it can be something like the shining sun at the center of the body. Even if it's not as clear as in our mind's eye, as we normally see it with our real eyes, we can still work with it. Even if it's just a feeling, then we can also work with that as well. The important thing is that the continuity is something that we can maintain as continuously as we can, for as long as we can, not letting our awareness slip away anywhere else if we can help it. And in order to dispel any thoughts that return to our mind, we do our best to ignore them. If this doesn't work for us, we can always make use of the traditional mantra, hearing the sound of words such as Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, with the sound of the mantra coming up from the center of that bright object. The sound of the mantra being soft, tender, soothing to the mind, until within our mind there's only two things remaining: the inner object at the center of ourselves, and the sound of that mantra if necessary, coming out from the center of the object. So we repeat the sound of the mantra in a gentle, unhurried way, effortlessly. We continue with the mantra for as long as we need to. At a certain point, the mantra itself will fade away of its own accord. And if you start to feel the mind is already calm, and it doesn't wander anymore, there's no need for us to restart with the mantra again. We just rest the awareness at the center of the inner object. But if we do notice that the sun is drifting away into random thoughts, then we just gently bring it back to the center of that inner object as before, going back to the mantra if necessary. The longer we can rest the mind gently at the center of the body, the more refined the mind will become. Little by little becoming calmer and calmer, more and more refined, softer, more peaceful. And we remain with this inner moment of peacefulness in the mind for a few moments longer. The notional sense of illumination that seems to come as a byproduct of meditation as it proceeds works rather like a touch-sensitive switch at the center of ourselves. Touch the switch gently enough, then the illumination will come on. In fact, the illumination is already there, but rather like the sun, it can sometimes be hidden behind a cloud, meaning that we're unable to see it. The light in the mind is sometimes blocked, similarly by any impurities within the mind. Sometimes to the extent that we may never know that there is light within our own bodies and minds. But through meditation we can gradually remove all those impurities from the mind, allowing the light of the inner sun to shine through brighter and clearer than before. So we rest the mind at the center of the body, lightly, gently and continuously. And we can feel that sense of inner peace flowing outward from the center of the body, shining outwards continuously as we apply the mind with the utmost gentleness, never using any pressure, never using any force, never in a hurry. Allowing that stream of peacefulness and happiness to flow forth from the center, while we observe like a neutral observer, as if we were just observing the view from a bus window, keeping track of the country scenery. Scenery may change, but we keep watching impassively. The longer we can gently rest the mind while observing at the center of the body, the more refined the mind will become. And in this sense, the mind will make a start on a journey towards the inner center of the center. As the mind becomes more and more refined, as you engage and connect with that deeper sense of happiness within, flowing forth, cleansing the body and mind, until we feel that both body and mind are being purified somehow by a special kind of energy from within. So now we continue to let the mind make that inward journey of its own accord, while we observe neutrally at the center of ourselves, each to our own practice in silence for a few more moments now, until we come to the appropriate time. So we continue to keep our mind on track at the center of the body the whole of the time. Our attention wanders away onto other things. Each time we realize, we just bring our attention back again to the center of the body as before. If the inner object disappears, we can think of a new one. If it changes, we just follow it in its new form. There's no need for us to change it back again. If thoughts recur in the mind, then we do our best to ignore them. But if they're too persistent to ignore, then we just make use of that mantra, Samma Arahang, as before. But in the meantime, we allow the mind to rest gently at the center of the body, noticing that sense of happiness from within that refreshes and energizes the mind, leaving us with the feeling of being awake and alive. And if we place our awareness very gently at the center of this feeling, or this inner illumination, we'll notice that this inner kind of happiness is something that we can allow to spread outwards from the center by a process known as the spreading of loving kindness. We can extend that loving kindness initially to the whole of ourselves, allowing that feeling or inner brightness to pervade the whole of our own body with good wishes, before allowing it to spread beyond ourselves, outwards to all those around us. Resting the mind at the center of the body, but allowing the radius of our loving kindness to extend further and further outwards into the atmosphere, in all directions all around, with the wish that all living beings be well and happy, free from suffering. We extend that sense of loving kindness further still outwards to the neighborhood, town, city, county, country, the whole continent, outwards to cover the whole world, with the wish that all living people or beings in the world be well and happy, free from suffering, free from illness, and extending that loving kindness further outwards into space, toward all the stars and galaxies, filling the whole universe with loving kindness and happiness, originating from the center of ourselves. We may even cast that same positive energy towards loved ones of ours, those still living, those who've already passed on, with the wish that they be well and happy, that they all have the opportunity to discover the same inner peace and happiness that we are now experiencing. So we continue to make good wishes for ourselves and for others, while spreading loving kindness in this way for the last few moments of our meditation together. Sabbe Buddha Palapata Pacchekanan Balang Arahandananjate Jena Arakam Bandami Sapaso Sapaputhanupavena Sapadhammanupavena Sapasanghanupavena Sathasoti Bhavantu Te. So if you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for this evening, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing to a more comfortable position before gradually finishing your practice. So I hope that went okay, especially for those who are new to meditation today. Not too long for you. Something to focus on. Yeah? So if there are any questions, you can always talk about it maybe at the end if you have any queries coming up from that. Yeah. As for the wisdom talk part of today, we are gradually working our way through a set of topics which come from Buddhist origin, which are like a sequence of character strengths or virtues or trainings, which, if you can master them, they lead sequentially towards more transcendental attainments, which support meditation. And at the moment, we are working our way through a group of those character strengths, which you might refer to as sort of soft skills. Recently, we've looked at things like respect, and this is the second part of a talk about humility, and where it's going from here will be things like gratitude. Yeah, so this is the territory we are making our way through at the moment. And last time I saw you, which was on Thursday, I mentioned that humility is not quite the same as respect. Respect is more to do with doing the opposite of fault-finding, which is to try to find things which are good in the people, the situations, the objects we come across, something that we can learn from. So picking up on what's good in the things around us. As for humility, it's more to do with how we see ourselves, which means instead of thinking that we're already great and have no room for improvement, even though we might be pretty great, but we can still see some things that we need to improve upon. So it's the opposite of basically being an arrogant person who thinks they know it all or they're already the bee's knees. So last time we tried to describe what humility was, and today we are looking a little bit more about how we might cultivate humility if we need more of it. And it is one of the subjects which sounds pretty easy to understand in theory, but it's quite hard to cultivate for real in one's character. And I'll start with more general advice on this topic and then move on to more specifically Buddhist advice for its cultivation. So basically, humility is to do with maybe the recognition that you are not always right and you don't always have all the answers. So it requires a sort of acceptance of yourself, warts and all, which some people find quite challenging. And some people find it quite easy to be humble when they're at the bottom of the food chain, but when they get increasingly higher up in their job or in their commitments or responsibilities, then when other people start treating you like you're infallible, then sometimes it's quite tempting to sort of believe them. And if you're not careful, then at the moment when you really need humility the most, you can end up in a senior position, but with a chronic case of arrogance. So being humble is one of the most admirable characteristics which a person can have, but unfortunately it's quite hard to find it in today's world. Often the people who are humble, we fail to notice them because they don't really stand out because they're humble. Because they tend not to talk about their accomplishments unless people really press them. They tend to be rather understated. And you might not really notice anything special about them apart from the fact that they're just a kind and sort of sympathetic person. And often, although they might be quite confident within themselves because they don't need validation from anyone else, then they never go out asking for it. So humble people tend to forget they're probably not the best person in the room, but they actually thrive in that environment because then they can learn a lot from all the other people around them with that realization. So there are as many as 12 different ways in which it's recommended that if we are somehow lacking in humility, then we might improve on that. So I've summarized this down from the usual sources. And probably a good place to start is to realize or to admit that you're not the best. Even though you might have tried your hardest to be great at what you do, you still have some way to go. And the second thing is to recognize that along with the best parts of ourselves, that we still have our flaws. That being human comes with both strengths and weaknesses. And the faster you can accept that, then the faster humility will follow in its wake. The third thing is to be grateful for what you have, and there's going to be a blessing dealing with this specifically a little further down the line. But in brief, if you're the sort of person who takes the time to count your blessings and be thankful for them, then it's a good way to have a more humble and a positive state of mind. Often the sense of gratitude comes with the realization that the good things that do come to you or which you do have aren't simply by your own independent abilities, but there have been other people who have supported you to get to that point as well. Sometimes that's quite humbling in itself. Fourth thing is to admit when you've made mistakes, what they call owning it these days, rather than immediately blaming your subordinates or deflecting or being defensive. Fifth way is to ask for help when you need it. Sometimes a sense of arrogance comes with the sense of thinking that we can solve all our own problems all by ourselves, when in fact we really are kidding ourselves. And the sixth thing, checking your own language, because often what you say tends to betray the thoughts that are under the surface, which might be things like arrogance or smugness or snobbery or vanity. Sometimes we can be slightly proud of ourselves, and it often feels quite pleasant to be like that. If we've done something good, then that's fair enough. And everyone is praising us, then that's good too. But if we don't realize when we've sort of floated away from the sense of reality in those situations, then we tend to get carried away. And you need to constantly ask yourself, was that snobbish that I said that, or was I a little bit vain in what I was saying? So if you can name those things, then you will be in less danger of slipping into arrogance. Something not boasting. Have you heard me talk about the half-full bottle? Can't remember when I mentioned it. So, but if you have a bottle, it's not a bottle, but it's half full. If you shake a half-full bottle, it tends to make a lot of noise. Just as people who are half full with abilities tend to draw everyone's attention to what little they have the whole of the time in a very in-your-face sort of way. But a bottle that's completely full, actually if you shake it, it doesn't make any noise at all. And that would be more the sort of humble person who doesn't need to say anything because the bottle is already full, as it were. Yeah. So boasting is generally a sign of a lack of something. Yeah. So can you, in an understated sort of way, mention what you are good at? Probably not in Britain. But generally the rule goes something like, when questioned specifically, you might just mention what you have achieved in an oblique manner without exaggeration. Number 9, try to be more considerate to others. Because if you are more empathetic towards other people and how they feel, it will make you less self-centered. It's a rule. Appreciate others. That's the origin of the sort of kindness and sort of lack of guile that you see in humble people. And that sort of thing can mean a lot to other people as well, which means that you're caring more about them than you are about yourself. Putting others first, the selfless sort of nature is a good training. Even just letting a person go ahead of you in traffic and that sort of thing is actually quite good for the soul. Listening more carefully to other people. One of the facets of an arrogant person is they're constantly trying to dominate a conversation and talk about themselves. But if you catch yourself doing that and just stand back and listen for a change to what other people are saying, it's actually quite a good antidote for that. And also, although you might think you're being sympathetic to people by trying to solve all their problems all the time, sometimes the important thing is not that you solve their problems, but sometimes that you listen to them. And last thing is to seek feedback from others on a regular basis. Sort of keeps things real. In fact, there's another blessing a little bit further down the line, especially to do with this as well. So listening to any feedback you get openly and also being grateful for that. From the Buddhist point of view, there are a few extra things which can be added to the general wisdom on being more humble. First being to avoid people who flatter you, the yay-sayers. Being surrounded by them the whole time is generally not a good environment to cultivate humility, because everyone's saying you great the whole time and you tend to believe them. So actually, if you realize that you have a tendency towards sort of delusions of grandeur in this sort of way, then maybe trying to find a few friends who are honest with you would be a better policy. Second thing is to be thorough in the things that you do with thought of how it may come over in other people's eyes. And I won't go into too much detail, but let's say the way you dress, the car you drive, the opinions you express, and whether you claim ownership of ideas can all be considered as arrogant behaviors if you're not careful by other people. So by saying thorough, think about these things before you do them, and just try to see how it might appear in other people's eyes if you are thinking to reduce that sort of image of arrogance which you might be suffering from. And the third way is, of course, to practice more mindfulness, focusing on the present, accepting a situation, accepting yourself even with your faults, not saying don't try to do anything about those faults, but the important thing is generally that if you accept them, give them space, then you can then do something about them. Instead of feeling somehow you have a chip on your shoulder that you have to get defensive about it. One sort of mindfulness you might not have heard about is mindfulness of the transience of life, memento mori. Say if you're getting too big for your shoes, then remember that a coffin's never too big for anyone. And it usually will sort of bring you back to your senses about and perspective about what's actually the important things in your life. Yeah. And a little story from a monk who was particularly humble. One we've met before. I think we had him leaping over canals in one of the previous talks. You remember him? Climbing trees to sleep at night? Well, this is a slightly different, same monk, but a slightly different occasion. His name is Sariputta, and he was one of the most gifted disciples of the Buddha, sometimes referred to as the right-hand disciple of the Buddha because he was so good at explaining the Buddha's ideas and teaching about them. And his story illustrates the connection very strongly between mindfulness and humility, because there was once another monk in the same community who had a certain grudge against Sariputta, and he accused him of having bumped into him and not apologizing. So, obviously not a humble thing to do. So the Buddha requested to Sariputta to justify himself against this accusation, which wasn't a true one. He made it up. And Sariputta explained, because I am a person who is steadfast in mindfulness, so don't go around bumping into people like that, I am careful of everything I do. I am mindful of the body with just the same care, and here comes the metaphor, that a person carrying a tray filled to the brim with oil, usually boiling oil sometimes, being stalked by someone brandishing a sword, should he spill a single drop? Get the idea? The same sort of mindfulness is required to walk along with that sort of threatening person behind you without spilling a single drop of oil. Is the same sort of mindfulness he aimed to cultivate for himself in all things in life. And in the same way, my humility can be compared with being like a doormat, he says a rag duster, a bull with broken horns, so obviously no threat to anyone, like an untouchable child who blunders into the village of another caste, all of whom have no opportunity to indulge in their own self-importance. So despite his attainments, he didn't claim to any of those, didn't boast about them. He made no mention of those, but he just mentioned that he had no self-importance or arrogance in the way he treated others. So if such a gifted monk can be humble, then who are we to look down on others? Within the Thai tradition, there's also a special way to cultivate humility, which is seen in the national tradition. They have Teacher's Day once a year in Thailand. Do they have that here? I think they have a lot of kids' days, mums and dads' days, but I don't think they have Teacher's Day, right? Well, they have Teacher's Day in Thailand, and it's the day when they have a special ceremony for all the grateful pupils to show their respect for their teacher. Okay, it comes somewhere in January. So this ceremony is called Waikru. Or teachers are sitting on a chair, or the kids are sitting on the floor, and they present them with a tray of special offerings which have a symbolic meaning. And this is a gesture of respect to show themselves to be worthy of the teacher's teachings throughout the year. And on the tray, on the little inset there, there are three things which are always on the tray along with other things. Not an apple for the teacher. Three things. First is aubergine flowers. Or you're more familiar with eggplant. Aubergine? Yeah? So 1 aubergine flowers, 2 coarse grass, and third thing is popcorn. And each one has a symbolic meaning. The eggplant flower or aubergine flower always hangs down. Have you ever grown any? Courgettes? Ring a bell? It's only the ones that hang their head down that will give any fruit. And in such the same way, the flowers which hold their head high will never have fruit. In the same way, humility, so this is what it's a symbol of, as a quality of every student to receive the teacher's knowledge to the full. So just as water flows downhill, then knowledge will flow towards those who are humble from someone who has more knowledge. As for the other two, which are sort of by the way, the coarse grass represents patience, because coarse grass is the sort of thing that you can find on the cracks in the pavement that gets squashed every day but still grows back tougher than before. Yeah, patience. And the other one is popcorn, which has to endure the heat in order to pop and become something you can eat. You all know the bits of the popcorn that you break your teeth on, right? Those were the ones that generally didn't go through the heat. So that is a symbol of self-discipline, a person who can take the heat and come out tender. Yeah. As for these qualities of effective learning, sensitivity for sense improvement, we do look at them further in number 27. I'll leave you with one story today, and it's a historical story about slavery. Usually slavery is a very politically sensitive issue, so sensitive that at various times in history it has caused a lot of strife in any nation's history. If you look at the United States, then abolition of slavery caused a civil war. I think I can say that without exaggerating. And many other countries, then there's been a lot of violence as a result of giving up slavery. For Thailand originally, and this is going back to mid-1800s, they also had some slaves too. And it was in the reign of King Rama V that because he was a monarch it was a time of absolute monarchy as well, so he had sort of full power to do what he liked basically, he still had the quality of humility, despite his position. And he wanted to, because he was quite a forward-thinking monarch, borrowed a lot of his ideas from the West, he decided that Thailand, to be seen as a civilized country, ought to also give up slavery. So he went to his advisors and he asked them how to go about this to ensure the minimum of strife and bloodshed. And his advisors gave him some good advice, was basically just try to get your foot in the door. Because he knew that the slaves were the most important convenience to a lot of the most influential people in the country. If he just said, oh, no more slaves, then he's going to get a lot of enemies overnight. And 99% would immediately refuse if he came up with a change in the law like that. So he sent a bunch of researchers out into society and asked what was the attitude to slaves in the general population. And he found out that many of the old slaves who'd been slaves all their life, who were 60 or 70 years old in many cases, if they were released, then they wouldn't really know what to do with their lives. So what should they do? So the king was very humble, and he made a very simple law in 1874 stipulating that anyone who had been born into slavery since 1868, so like 6 years before, would become a free man on reaching the age of 21. So it basically applies to all the children. Very simple law. And that after this law had been decreed, no more children would enter slavery anymore. So the input to the slavery population would be basically petered out. Yeah? So 10 years later, pretty much all the old slaves had all sort of passed on. And all the slave masters looked for new slaves, but the new law said there couldn't be any new ones. So little by little, very gently, slaves sort of became extinct in the population of Thailand, not because they weren't there anymore, but because they had all become free citizens. And because he'd done it so gently and so in such a unannounced sort of way, not a single drop of blood was spilled along the way. So that was all because of the humility of the king in Thailand at the time. So in summary, being humble is important as a thing to develop because it improves the quality of your relationships with other people and allows you to listen to others more than you talk about yourself. And at the end of the day, it says a lot about your character and your values. So really becoming a more humble person is a big favor you can do to yourself. However, it doesn't come easy, but it's an important part of your self-development. And people will always remember you for your kindness and for your modesty, because it's admired by in any society that you might enter. So for today, for those of you who are new to meditation, I would just like to say that if you enjoyed meditation today, found that it was something that felt promising for you, then I would encourage you to meditate at home if you can, daily if you can, maybe for 20 minutes a day. Less than that, you may not see a great deal of change in your quality of mind, but if you can work 20 minutes into your daily schedule somehow, then little by little it will start to take root and you'll start to see an improvement in your meditation by itself. So it might be first thing in the morning, it might be last thing at night, it could even be in your lunch break, but if you can find a place in your routine for meditation, then it will become something that you find will save you time in other places because you're thinking more clearly about the way you spend your time. If you are looking for guidance for meditation when you're at home, you may find the MindGem app useful because it has lots of audio tracks on it which you can follow along with of different lengths, which you can gradually build up or find different approaches to the meditation that might suit you the best. Here we have in-person classes. Someone asked me whether they go on all year round. It's true that generally over the Christmas period we stop the classes. So I think we have classes on the 20th and 22nd of December, if anyone's free from all that Christmas shopping or whatever. But from Christmas to New Year that week, then I don't think anyone will turn up anyway, even if we did hold the classes. But you can still come if you like, because we're all still here, but probably doing other things like preparing for the retreat. Yeah. So you notice that Thursday evening has slightly longer meditation time. That's the only difference. Online, we still have the Dhammakaya Meditation Europe activity every Saturday evening between 7 and 8 p.m. British time, between 8 and 9 European time, and the Zoom coordinates are there for you. And the next full moon meditation will be on the 8th of December, coinciding with the Thursday class on the theme of family harmony in the holiday season. And that will be online as well for those who are interested. And the informal New Year retreat taking place wasn't really designed for Westerners like yourself, but it turns out that a lot of our Western meditators actually have free time at Christmas and New Year when they don't have any free time at any other time of the year. So we have already a small group of people joining us for that, and we'll do it in bilingual for the late morning and afternoon classes at the very least. So if you're interested to come along for that, you can come for parts of it. You can turn up in the morning and go home at night. If you wish, there are many flexible ways of joining that. But I don't think we would do it online this time. We allow people to join it and get the in-person experience for a change. But if you're interested, then please speak to Kriwan or Patrick about that. So that's probably all I have for you today. But if you have any questions, comments or feedback at this point, I'd be very pleased to hear from you. May all of you enjoy happiness, success, prosperity in life. Whatever good things you wish for, may those things come to you easily, and may you be able to attain humility, modesty, and overcome any arrogance in your subconscious now and forevermore.